Hey guys, it's Kevin getting my review for Separation. So what Separation is essentially about is basically we center on this character, Jeff. He is this artist of sorts, but he also is a father, and he currently is not at a great point in his life. He has this ex-wife that is at a point where she basically wants to take full custody of his daughter. She feels that she is more fit to raise her because Jeff really isn't doing much with his life at all. And one day, Maggie ends up in this freak accident where basically she ends up getting hit by this car, which eventually is declared as a murder, and this gets Jeff to basically take the chance to raise his daughter now as his own. However, even though now he has full custody of her, it is clear there is a presence that is still in the house that seems to potentially be the ghost of Maggie and could potentially be her wanting to still battle for custody even while she is still dead. So, Separation overall, I was really not looking forward to this movie. I mean, look, we're at a point, in April, this happens like every year. There's a horror film that comes out, and it feels like one of those horror movies that they just didn't know when to put it out because it's terrible, and so it sat on the shelf forever, and now it's finally coming out, even before the pandemic was a thing. I know people like to say that they're really only doing this because of the pandemic, but even before the pandemic was a thing, this always happens, where like we get these horror movies, they just kind of come out of nowhere. Separation is the latest one, and it didn't look very good. Knowing it was directed by William Brent Bell, I was very much not excited for it, and it's come out, and holy shit, having seen Separation, I mean, this has to be one of the most disjointed, confounding horror films that I have seen in a very long time. Separation is a huge disaster of a film that in some ways is easily one of William Brent Bell's worst films he's ever put together, and really shows how he has learned so very little as a director overall. But we're just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And I will say, overall, going into this movie, that was definitely one of the things I thought were going to be really good. This is a really good cast. There's a lot of actors here that I really do enjoy, but I was not too impressed by a lot of the acting in this movie. I found it to be very subpar. Let's start off by talking about Rupert Friend. I actually don't think he's a terrible actor. I know a lot of people are not fans of him because of Hitman Agent 47, and yeah, he wasn't that great in that. I did not like him very much in that movie. But there have been other films that I think he's done a good job in. The problem is, this is not one of them. Really at all. This is very much not one of them. Friend in this movie, his acting amounts to him being very monotone, not really seeming like he's into this very much at all. He just seems a bit annoyed. This is a character that is supposed to be this father that is very passionate. He's supposed to really care a lot about his daughter, and the way that Friend acts almost feels like he's exactly what his ex-wife was accusing him of. He seems very dispassionate, he seems very annoyed, and he just seems like he doesn't really want to be here. And just in general, I was not impressed by his performance very much at all. There are some moments where he does seem to warm up to the material a little bit, and he starts to get into the role more, but they are very few and far between. I really was not a fan of what he was doing very much here at all. He very much disappointed me in this movie. However, easily the biggest disappointment for me in terms of acting here is Madeleine Brewer, who I was at least expecting to be good in this film. She's a fantastic actress, and I don't know what happened here. I really don't, but her performance is so incredibly inconsistent. There are moments where she's doing an alright job, and I thought she was fine in the movie, but then there's a point in the film where she just gets way too over the top, and it becomes an almost cartoonish level, and it just really was not working for me at all. This was not a grounded performance very much in any way, and I was just very disappointed by her performance here. I think Brewer is a fantastic actress, but this film, she really did not do that great of a job. I was not very impressed by her. Violet McGraw as well, I really didn't like that much either. And the thing is, like, she is definitely a very talented
child actress. I mean, she did some amazing work in The Haunting of Hill House. I liked her in the movie Our Friend as well. I think I even liked her in her smaller role in Dr. Sleep. She didn't have a lot to do in that film, but she definitely still did make an impression. Here, she's just very stiff. It feels like she's reading lines off of the script most of the time. It doesn't really seem like she's into this very much at all. And again, she really does not do much to elevate this film. And considering that her character especially is supposed to be a big part of this film, it's really supposed to freak you out, a lot of what she's doing, it just really doesn't work. I found her to be very, again, I just found her to not really give off much of an impression in this film. It very much seemed like she was not really into this at all. So again, I was not very impressed by her. Mamie Gummer in this film is really annoying. Thankfully, we don't have to deal with her that much, but I really did not like her. I thought she was very annoying. The only performance that really worked for me in terms of the acting is Brian Cox. I actually thought that he did a really good job here. He puts a lot of effort into this movie. He plays this father that he plays Maggie's father, and he's very concerned after her death. He doesn't really trust Rupert Friend's character, and he's really trying to get to the bottom of it, and his performance really worked for me. He was the only performance in the movie that felt like he was giving a shit, that felt like he wanted to be here, and I overall did like what he did in the film, but other than that, the acting is really not good here at all. I didn't really feel that there were many people that were really into this movie, and that was very disappointing to me because I really did think the acting was going to be one of the things that maybe elevates this film, but unfortunately, virtually all of this cast brings it down here. Let's get into the directing and the writing, because here's the thing. As bad as the acting is, I can't really blame them for being really terrible in the film, because the directing here by William Brent Bell, I mean, it might just be, in terms of directing, his worst film yet. I mean, I truly don't know most of what he was trying to do in this movie. His directing in this film is just so utterly confusing. There are so many things he'll do in this film that just really don't work. I mean, the biggest thing I would say is that as a horror film, this movie utterly fails. I mean, there's not a single moment in this movie that's even legitimately scary. Nothing really creeped me out. I was never really unsettled throughout anything, so that really doesn't work very much at all. But it goes far beyond that, because the message that he's really trying to sell with this movie as well, I really can't figure it out. I can't figure out what he was really trying to do with this movie. Because, okay, yes, you look at this premise and you think it's going to be like a custody battle of sorts, and that's basically what it is. It's basically like a horrific version of a custody battle. But the way that it's done, it just isn't done in a way that's very compelling. And his directing especially, he just felt very off his mark. And there are a lot of things in this film that he should know as a director to not do at this point. There are many moments, especially in terms of the horror, that are clearly supposed to be very scary, but they're done in such a way to where they just feel very lame. And I don't know what Bell needs to do to become a better director, but he just really did not seem like he was into this at all. It really just felt like he was just kind of going through the motions when it came to this film, almost like he's just kind of, he's just not really caring that much anymore. There's no passion in this movie. There's no real There's no real theme of this movie. I didn't really feel anything in terms of a directorial vision, and it's just very disappointing to see. So yeah, I really did not like his directing here very much at all, but the writing in this film especially, holy shit, the writing here is so bad. I mean, this has to be one of the most convoluted and just confusing films that I've seen in quite a bit. Not just horror films, but films in general that I've seen in quite a bit. Because, okay, the premise here is simple enough. It doesn't seem like it's gonna get too overly complicated. We have this character that he's now trying to tend to his daughter, and it seems like he's trying to be a bigger part of her life, and he's trying to be the father that he really does she really does deserve. But then when she goes to bed, she's still haunted by the ghost of her mother. Okay, that's fine. That's a fine premise right there. But the problem is that's not all we're dealing with in this movie. There's a lot more at play here that really doesn't work in terms of the script. I mean, for one thing, our main character of Jeff is very unlikable. I was not really a fan of him very much at all. There's really not a lot to get behind with his character. I understand he's trying to be a better father to his daughter and things like that, and that's great, but we really don't know all that much about him. We know that he's a cartoonist, and we know that he really has not taken it seriously for a while. You know, we get the sense that the mother took her job a lot more seriously, and that she really wanted to be a great mother for the character of Samantha. She wanted to be there for her, and Jeff, on the other hand, has not really done as great of a job with that. So, okay, on that front, I definitely do understand it. I get what the film is, I get what the film is trying to do, where, like, she's trying to be a better mom to Jenny, and then he's not. But then you also have this drama with the fact that, Maggie wasn't just like hit by the car. She was straight up murdered by the car. So now we have to try to figure out who might have done that. And so there's a lot going on in this movie. And then you also have this whole thing with him going back to work and him trying to tend to his drawings. And there's just a lot of things in this movie that just really don't work at all. I mean, the other thing that I was very confused about is how much they focus on his drawings. It's a big part of the movie. He wants to become this great cartoonist again. He wants to make this a more serious career and things like that. And part of the movie is that the monsters that he's drawing, they start to come to life. He starts to see them, and the problem is they don't do anything with these characters. And I was just kind of wondering, like, what is the point of these creatures? And the thing is, like, they're good creature designs. Like, the one you saw in the movie with, like, the contortionists is actually really good. But that creature, understand, has nothing to do in this movie. He just kind of, like, creeps around, and that's kind of it. And so I'm just wondering, like, what is the point of any of this? I really think it would have been a cooler idea if all of the creatures that they encountered were something that Jeff drew, and that his drawings start to come to life in that way, and that maybe they're a symbol of, like, his anger, his aggression towards what Maggie was doing, and now he needs to find a way to, write something that's more positive. I think that would have been really good. But the problem is they don't do that. They don't do that at all. So you're just kind of wondering, like, why are they focusing on this? Especially if our big villain of the movie is supposed to be this spirit of Maggie. And we also don't really know what she wants. Like, what is her real what is her real, like, motive here? Is she just trying to take Jenny away, or is she getting revenge on Jeff? We don't really know what she's doing here. There's a lot of moments especially that just feel very inconsistent in terms of what we know about her character, in terms of what we know about her as a ghost. It just doesn't really line up very much at all. So I think that part of the film very much does fall flat as well, and that's another thing that just really bothered me in this film. I think they could have done a much better job in terms of, writing. And again, I think if this wasn't a horror film, like, this premise could legitimately work, where you could really focus on the fact that, Jenny is still seeing this ghost, and it's her way of, like, getting closure with her mom, and, like, Maggie's whole goal is not necessarily to take Jenny away. It's for Jeff to realize how he needs to be a better father to her, and maybe he, like, needs to prove to her that he needs to be a better father. So you get what I'm saying? Like, I just don't think this idea works as a horror movie. I think it's just a little too silly as a horror movie, and that's the other thing that I just don't think works here very much at all.
There's another idea that they do involving the character of Jenny. There's this recurring thing throughout the movie where after Maggie has passed away, she's now constantly talking like a baby. There are these videos that she and her parents did where basically, you know, she said things like, baby is doing this, and this is how she's talking now. And I got the impression that we're supposed to be scared by this. This is supposed to, like, unsettle us, but really, I just found it very awkward. I just kind of sat there like, why are we doing this? Like, what is this supposed to even mean? And again, I think if this wasn't a horror movie, they could really dive deeper into the fact that, like, this is, you know, this is her way of sort of, like, coping with the loss of a parent. I think that would be a lot more interesting if they did that. But again, because it's a horror film, it has to unsettle you. It has to create all this tension, and it just doesn't do that. It's just a very strange choice. So again, it's another thing that, like, it's not a bad idea. I just don't think what he's doing pertains to a horror film. And that's really my biggest thing with this entire film, is that good ideas, but the way you execute it, it feels like Bell is only comfortable with writing horror movies. So, like, he insisted that this film had to be a horror film, even if it really doesn't work as one. So that's another thing that just really brings this film down for me. But a lot of the other characters in this film, I just don't really understand the point of them. Madeleine Brewer's character especially, she plays this character of Samantha, and she seems like she is very much into Rupert Friend's character. She's constantly trying to cheer him up. She's like, when he's annoyed with Maggie, she's telling him, like, oh, you can't let her get to you and things like that. And it's like, okay, I like the fact that she's, like, the friend to him. But then they take her in this really weird direction in, like, the second act of the movie. And I was like, okay, what is the point of this? And then they do something else with her. And I just could not believe they went in this direction with this character. So not just because it's a really dumb twist, but it's also because, aside from, like, one moment, it has no real bearing on this movie whatsoever. Especially when you take into account what the main threat of this movie is supposed to be. I don't really know what this twist is doing here. It really just feels like William Brent Bell thinks he needs to have a twist in every single movie, and so he implements this bullshit even though it doesn't really fit here at all. So it's another thing where I'm like, why did you make this choice? What were you really trying to go for here? It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I don't think he did a very good job with that either, and I was not impressed by her character. Even Maggie as a character, I don't think is very well written, because, like, I get it that she wants Jeff to be there for Jenny. I definitely do understand that. But as a character, she's very unlikable. She's very much just the nagging ex-wife, and that's kind of all she is in this movie. And I feel like if you wanted to show that she was the better parent, you needed to do a better job of that, and they really don't do that. Especially the fact that, while Jeff is the parent that's, like, at home, she's the one that's at work constantly. And I just don't understand, like, why is Jeff a bad father if he's at home constantly and he's always there for Jenny? It just isn't very convincing. They don't do a very good job with that. Like I said, in terms of story, the only thing that really worked for me is Brian Cox's character. I like his overall storyline where he is very doubtful of Jeff. He doesn't really trust him, and he wants to see if he actually is a good father to Jenny, but he's also very suspicious because this whole, thing that's happened is now being declared as a murder. So now he's wondering maybe Jeff could have potentially been behind it in a fit of rage. I think that is a really good story, and I wish they would have leaned into that a lot more, because it was a hell of a lot more interesting than everything else that was going on in this movie, which is just kind of a giant clusterfuck of a film. There's so many things that don't work here. Simon Quarterman's character as well. They have him. He's like the boss of of Jeff's, like, he's like the boss of Jeff's, like, work. He's trying to help him become a more serious artist, and they give him a lot of comedic relief, and really none of it works at all. I was not a fan of his character very much at all. I feel like you can kind of cut him out of the movie, and I feel like the movie would be pretty much the same. I did not find him to be a very necessary character. So yeah, writing here, this film just utterly falls flat, and they don't do a very good job with it. I will say, cinematography-wise, this film is also
also really not that great. I mean, there's a lot of scenes here that are just really boring to look at. They're very gray and just not very appealing in terms of cinematography. And William Brent Bell's been doing this a lot lately. He loves this like grayscale in his films, and it just isn't very appealing to look at. I don't understand why he wants to put all of his films in like this grayscale of sorts, but it doesn't work in this movie, and it just looks really weird. There's a lot of choices in terms of cinematography. Like, for some reason, there are these moments where Jeff will see something, and there's like these flashes of red that happen, and I'm like, what the fuck is the point of this? Like, am I supposed... Did you think this would make it scarier? Did you think this would, make whatever is at play that much more pronounced? Because it really didn't do much of anything for me. I just thought it was a very odd choice overall. And then, like I said, in terms of scares, I mean, forget about it. This movie is not scary at all, and a lot of that is because the way these characters are reacting just doesn't feel very natural. There'll be a moment where Jeff will see, like, that contortionist character, and he has no reaction to it whatsoever. It doesn't seem like he's scared. It doesn't seem like he's unsettled. He doesn't even seem a little bit startled. He doesn't really pay it any mind whatsoever. So again, the scares in this movie are really just not good at all. Every single one of them you can see coming, and I just didn't like any of what he was doing here in terms of the scares in this movie, so that really didn't work for me. The score is really not that great either. It's fine, I guess, but it's very generic in that way. And the editing, oh my god, this has to be one of the worst edited films I have seen in quite a bit. There's so many moments in this movie, not just in terms of the fact that the editing here feels very choppy, but there are whole scenes in this movie that are clearly out of order. There's one sequence especially, and you've seen it in the trailer, and when it happens in this film, it feels almost like that there was a scene that's missing, and then you get to the next scene, you're like, oh, that's what's supposed to be here. And so you're thinking, like, why didn't he move this scene to before this? And I don't know how William Brent Bell looked at that and said, yeah, that's the cut we're gonna release. Yeah, let's not do any other work. Let's not try to revise it in any way. Let's not try to cut anything out. We'll just leave it the way it is, even though it is an entirely disjointed mess. So there's so many moments that just don't really fit here at all. There are scenes where it'll be daytime and then it just abruptly cuts to night, and it just doesn't feel like a natural shift. Scenes do not flow in the way that they should. It is a complete disaster in terms of editing, and I just do not think that they did a very good job with that at all. So again, it's definitely a much bigger complaint than I expected. I did not expect the editing in this movie to be so bad, but it really is one of the worst parts of this movie. It is headache-inducing at points how many times this film will cut from a scene and then we'll cut to something that's completely unrelated. There's so many plot points that are just kind of drop. They don't really go back to, and you don't understand, what's really going on, and they don't do much with that at all. So again, the editing is just a complete mess here. And then the way they end the movie as well, you think that the film is finally wrapping up. You're like, all right, great, the movie's finally ending. We can finally leave. And then they decide to have a post-credit scene, and they try to set it up for a sequel. And not only is it completely unnecessary for a film like this to have a sequel, but it completely undoes what they just said was going on in the ending. At the ending of the movie, you finally think you have a handle on what's really going on here, what the true purpose of it was, why all of this is even happening to these characters, and then the ending happens and you're just like, what is the point? Where are you even trying to go anymore? Why are you even doing this? And it just feels like Bell doesn't want us to question it. He's like, who cares? Who cares if it doesn't make sense? Who cares if, there's a lot of things here that just don't really feel like they go together or even feel like they should be in the same movie? Who cares if there are characters that have absolutely no purpose to this film whatsoever? Who cares if we have likable characters? Just none of that matters to him. Everything is kind of thrown out the window. Guys, Separation is just an absolute disaster of a film. It has some good ideas overall, but as a horror movie, it just utterly fails. Not only is it completely tensionless and
scareless in that way, but it has some of the most poor editing, some extremely convoluted writing, and acting even that just doesn't, and very disinterested acting, and just overall as a film is just a complete mess. And I don't understand how William Brent Bell continues to make movies like this. I feel like at this point he should be at a point in his career where he recognizes what works and what doesn't, and it feels like he's actually getting worse as a director. He's getting worse as a writer. He's not able to recognize what's not working in this movie, what's not clicking together. It just doesn't seem like he cares, and it's very unfortunate because, like I said, I do think he has some good ideas, but he just never executes it in the way that it really shouldn't. So as a result, we have a film that is just a complete and utter disaster. Separation is easily one of the poorest excuses for a horror film I have seen in quite a bit, and I am going to give it a D. But overall, guys, to my review of Separation, if you have interest to see this movie, I guess check it out, but this really is not a film worth seeing in theaters, very much at all. I saw it with a crowd, and even they were so confused by what happened. Like, there were these two people behind me, and they left the movie, and they were like, so what was even the point of what happened? And I myself was very much questioning that, so I really don't recommend seeing this at all. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
Moving on.